The purpose of this presentation is to summarize and reflect on different ways in which cinema has, throughout its history, imagined the future of human civilization and the future of the planet itself. Typically, futuristic films have contemplated scenarios resulting from a range of global crises, planetary threats, catastrophes, and other transformative events. Many such films have adopted a utopian or a dystopian perspective, or a combination of both. So I will offer a very brief explanation of those terms, utopia and dystopia, and will point at films from various decades by way of illustration. Finally, I will offer some reflections on the pedagogical value of futuristic films and will suggest some questions we, as critical spectators, may want to pose to those films as we watch them. I'll start with a brief explanation of the terms. You may know the term utopia from Thomas More's novel of the same name. Utopia typically refers to an ideal society that has achieved the highest levels of equality, justice, wisdom, and moral values, however they may be understood at a given time in history. As imaginary entities, utopias are not real places, but representations of a society's dreams, values, and aspirations. Dystopia may be defined as the opposite of utopia, as it depicts a future world that is dominated by political totalitarianism, corruption, social injustice, violence, and/or environmental devastation. If utopias are representations of a society's dreams and aspirations, dystopias reveal a society's fears, anxieties, and nightmares. I'm going to show you some selected samples, starting with dystopian films, because they are by far the more common. We'll start with 1984, adapted from George Orwell's novel, surely the most emblematic and influential dystopian fiction of all times. A couple major film adaptations of this novel have been made over the decades. The images you're seeing correspond to the 1956 version directed by Michael Anderson. Another version was made in 1984 precisely, but I prefer this one. Alphaville, a dystopian mystery science fiction thriller directed by Jean-Luc Godard in 1965. A very dark story involving a government agent on an intergalactic mission to destroy a computer that can control people's minds.
Vous menacez la sécurité de l'Alphaville.
Indeed, computers have been at the core of many dystopian films over decades. Brazil, one of my favorite films of all times. Terry Gilliam's 1985 masterpiece has been described as a dystopian satire of bureaucracy, surveillance, corporate greed, and state capitalism. It is a darkly humorous film with echoes of Orwell, Kafka, and indeed Monty Python. Terry Gilliam's, of course, being one of the founding members of Monty Python. Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, is a 1982 film directed by Ridley Scott based on a 1968 novel by Philip Dick. The story is set in 2019 Los Angeles and involves a cop played by Harrison Ford on a mission to capture a group of fugitive artificial humans known as replicants. It's interesting to note, when the film was made, 2019 was far away in the future, and for us it's the past now. Now on to some utopian films. They are much less common and also less clear-cut. Most of them do not present fully utopian futures. In most cases, their utopian worlds are imperfect, ephemeral, fragile, under constant threat, or have a hidden dark side to them. Oftentimes, they are utopian only for a privileged elite at the expense of those who are exploited or eliminated. We'll start with Metropolis, a German expressionist drama directed by Fritz Lang in 1927. Metropolis remains one of the fundamental science fiction films and one of the most influential films of all times. As the other films I will mention next, Metropolis serves as a powerful example of the imperfect, contradictory nature of cinematic utopias. Things to Come. This British film from 1936 envisions the world's reconstruction after a decades-long devastating world war. Inspired by the writings of H.G. Wells, this film is utopian and cautionary in equal measures. Lost Horizon, a 1937 adventure drama directed by Frank Capra, based on the novel by James Hilton. Surely one of the quintessential utopian films, it lends itself particularly well to a reflection on the fragility and the ambivalence of cinematic utopias. Forbidden Planet, directed by Fred Wilcox in 1956, Forbidden Planet is one of the fundamental science fiction films of all times. Much like the previous three, this film offers a utopian perspective that is tempered by an awareness of human flaws and weaknesses. Now on to some critical reflections. Whether utopian or dystopian, futuristic films may be seen as portals that transport us to other worlds and other times. But at the same time, futuristic films always speak of the present, and in that sense they act as mirrors, that is, reflections of the time when they were made and of the society that made them. By watching science fiction films, we may or may not learn much or anything at all about the future. But we do learn about the fears, anxieties, dreams, desires, as well as the ideological structures, social and political conflicts and tensions at play when and where those films were made. How should we watch futuristic films? That is, what questions should we pose to them as we watch them? Well, a crucial question for any given film is whether such film points at the core reasons for the crisis, catastrophe, or transformative event being depicted. Whether the film identifies causes, ascribes responsibilities, establishes arguments and perspectives that may help us understand the roots and not just the symptoms or the effects of the events. Also, whether the film invites reflection, whether it opens itself up to a critical dialogue with the spectators, whether it allows for a debate on the complexities of the issues, as opposed to, say, oversimplifying the issues or imposing a narrow, binary or Manichaean perspective on them, as many films do. More specifically, we may inquire what type of social economic system a particular film favors, be it explicitly or implicitly. Capitalism, socialism, anarchism, or perhaps something else? What is the role of technology in it? In whose hands is such technology, and for what purposes is it used? Does the film show how life is sustained in that future world? Is it a sustainable world? Where does the energy come from? Is it renewable? How is food obtained? What does the film say about social justice, environmental justice, equality, solidarity, love? What does it not say about those things? Many science fiction stories are about saving the world from a variety of apocalyptic threats. We may ask ourselves, and the films, what world are they trying to save? Who and what must be saved? And who and what may be sacrificed in the process? As we watch the films and ask all those questions, we must consider, how are those futuristic films from the past relevant to the present? What lessons can we learn from them? How may those lessons be applicable to our society and our planet today? As some indigenous American cultures do, we may look at the present as the result of the dreams our ancestors had for us. Consistent with that thought, we may want to envision the future and ask ourselves, what is our dream for our descendants? What kind of ancestors do we want to be for them? As you can see, the future is full of questions. For our own sake and that of our planet, let's try and find the right answers.